Oh, yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to have so much fun today, and thank you for joining us because you're going to have fun with us. Today, we have the author of Why Are You Still Single? Why Are You Still Single? And Average Joe's take on what is really going on in the dating pool and what you can do to stay afloat. And he found out yesterday he's got another book, Confessions of a Middle-Aged Short Guy with No Game. Oh, man, I just love this topic. I love this topic. Why are you still single? Please welcome author Vince Guaglione. How are you? Good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning.
Oh, man, this is the greatest topic, and I have 9,000 questions for you. The first question is, Vince, is this a personal journey of yours so when you write this book, why are you still single? Mm-hmm. Is this something personal to you that you are going through today in life, were going through when you wrote the book? Where are you with this journey?
Well, yeah, it was, in a way, it was a personal journey. So I'd been single for a long time, in and out of relationships over the years. And recently, I noticed that it seemed that more and more singles were having difficulties connecting with other singles. And, part of this is, of course, the advent of social media. And everybody's got an online profile. They're on multiple sites, etc. And it turns out after doing some research and just taking my own personal experiences, I noticed things had changed quite significantly in the dating world now. Very fast-paced society. Right. We're an instant gratification society, and of course, it's kind of bled over into dating and the dating world. So I wanted to at least dive into those issues and try to see if I could find some sort of common denominators as to why everyone seemed to be having the same problems that I was.
Right. What an interesting topic to dive into and start researching, right? It's one thing to say, oh, man, I'm single, I'm frustrated, I got heartache, and I just can't seem to find the right partner. But it's another thing to go in and do some research and try to figure out why others are experiencing the same thing, because it's a pretty big pool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a big pool.
Now, there's so many topics. I was reading through your book last night, and I'm actually smiling ear to ear because as I'm reading through some of these topics in your book, things are hitting me like, wow, that was my life. Wow, that was my life. But look, here we are with coronavirus. Lockdown. You want to talk about a bad dating pool, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that doesn't make it any easier for sure. But the good thing about this is that it forces us to kind of take a step back and reset, right? So because, let's say before coronavirus, you had the ability to just connect with someone fairly quickly, send a couple text messages, and before you know it, you've scheduled a first meeting or a date, right?
Right.
But that might not be your best option. Sure, it definitely gets you in front of, a lot of people. It exposes you to a lot of people, but are they really good matches for you, So this environment forces you to take a step back and maybe do more communicating before you get to that first meeting. So that's kind of the way that I had looked at it even before Corona. Anyone that I had matched with for, say, I would spend some time trying to get to learn a little bit about the person before actually committing the time and making the effort. Because as we know, we hear this a lot, first dates, first meets, you schedule it. And then all of a sudden you get the message saying, hey, can we reschedule? Or, hey, can we do this another time? So, it might have been that, that other person just might not have been feeling it or just agreed to something quickly and then changed their mind, right? And then, of course, when it comes to online dating and dating in general, there are many other options as well. So you have the whole shiny object syndrome where, this person looks good on paper and then all of a sudden here comes someone better. And then, oh, well, I'm really not that interested in the first person I was talking to. So I'm just going to bail on that.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot.
Yeah, it happens to everyone. That's happened to me quite frequently. A couple times I've, actually been leaving the house, locked the door, got in the car, and then got the message saying, hey, can we reschedule? Or I was already at the venue and the person, showed up a half an hour late and was not really that interested anyway. Or, as I'm driving, hey, I need to reschedule this. And then I'm turning around and going home. So I think in this environment, it's definitely helped in that it forces us to take a little bit of a step back and do more of an evaluation.
Yeah. Well, what a concept. What a concept though. Like, communicate before you go out on a date. That's such a concept, right? And then I started thinking, because it was about a month ago, and I said, oh my gosh, who's going to win in this coronavirus? Match.com. Because so just out of curiosity this morning, I said, I'm going to go look at their stock. And in 30 days, it went from $62 and it's up to $78 in 30 days. So I'm not giving any stock advice here, but if anyone is winning right now, it's the liquor stores and Match.com.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Well, yeah, of course. That's really, at this point, it's one of the only, online is really the only avenue, because you can't get out and meet people in person. You don't have those social events. You don't have those singles events to go to.
You could meet somebody in a parking lot and like park your cars next to each other, or like go lakeside and park your cars next to each other and just crack your window a little bit. Right.
Yeah, that's the new dating in 2020.
I love it. I think it's exciting. Oh my gosh. So, man, there's just so many topics I want to talk to you about, because there's the dating, it's different when you're dating and you're 23 years old and you're Snapchatting versus when you're 55 years old and you move to another state, right? Yep. So do you think the older you get, the harder it is because you get set in your ways? I think the older you get, sometimes you go, being alone isn't so bad.
Right. Yeah. There's obviously as you're older, you have more life experiences, right? So you have a lot of negative experiences as well when it comes to dating, when it comes to, past relationships, divorces. Sometimes you get that bitter taste in your mouth that, is a very difficult thing to reconcile, So as you get older, and yeah, of course, we do get set in our ways. So it becomes more of an adjustment, or it's one of those things where like, okay, well, maybe this isn't as important to me now as it might have been. So I'm just going to say the heck with it for a little while. But there are different challenges as we move through life, of course. And certainly, having those, the big one is, having those past negative experiences, which cause all sorts of, internal conflict and struggle. And then just the fear that you have, or you might have had, that, potentially blocks you from getting or, finding what you want today. Fear is a biggie. That's a primary driver for a lot of people. Especially, those who have had bad situations and been involved in bad relationships, they're afraid to take that chance again. So it's certainly, there's more baggage, bottom line, as we get older. So of course, it would make sense that, there's more hurdles to clear as we move through life.
Well, one of the things you mentioned in your book is to reconcile your differences and your issues. It's probably a good idea to do that before you go out on a date, right? I mean, who wants to go out on a date and hear, I actually had it happen to me after I went through a divorce. I went out on a date and I apparently was talking about my divorce all night. I didn't realize it, but imagine what a nightmare of a date. Like, who wants to hear about your divorce right now?
Yeah, that happens a lot. But yeah, that's the tough part is, understanding the things that you're carrying around with you, right? That could potentially be stopping you, or could be roadblocks to, having a healthy attitude and a mindset about it.
Right. I think it would be kind of funny if you showed up on a date with a suitcase in your hand and somebody was like, what are you doing? What's in the suitcase? Baggage.
Yeah. Some of those suitcases are large.
Well, now, and what about kids, right? You have kids and you love your children. It's funny because I'm going back to my radio days. We actually had a conversation on the show about dating and when you have kids, you don't really want to bring them into the picture right away, right? I mean, I think it'd be funny if you brought them on the first date.
I think I saw a movie or something where that happened. I forget the name of the movie where the 12 or 13-year-old was with the dad as he was going on his dates. It's pretty entertaining. But now that brings up, that's just another one of those issues that you have to discuss, or you have to at least put it out there. Say, hey, I do have children, and that may or may not be a deal breaker for some people. But the more information you have up front, the better off you are. Especially with your own stuff, if you have baggage, not necessarily all of the emotional baggage we're talking about. We're just talking about things like, say, lifestyle issues, anything that could be potentially in conflict with what how another person with their lives, for example. So it's like, for dating apps, and when you're in these social gatherings, singles gatherings, the kids issue always comes up. Everybody knows, okay, this person has kids, this person doesn't, etc.
Right.
So, but I mean, you can't get away from that. That's you can't really hide that. It's like if we were talking about a previous book that I'd written about me being a short guy. I'm 5'7". It's like I can't get around height. People are going to see me like, yeah, he's a short guy. So, same thing.
Well, back to the kids though. I'm all I can think about is like, what do you do when you have like wild kids? Like they're out of control. The 9-year-old just burned the garage down last week. Like, do you bring up the fact that you have kids?
Well, yeah. I mean, of course you want to bring it up. You don't want to tell them they burned down the garage.
Right. You might not.
I'm not talking to an expert here because I never had any kids, so I'm probably not the best authority on this.
That's right. Well, so when you write the next book, you need to sit down with me over a beer. It'll be a whole nother book.
All right, we'll do.
Oh my gosh. So what do you think today? Let's set aside this coronavirus. Let's set aside the quarantine lockdown. Okay. You're a single person. Okay. Because yesterday I screwed up the title of your book and I apologize, but this is not just about single men. This is about single people. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're single in today's world. What is the number one, if you had to narrow it down, what is the number one obstacle? Is it because the pool is massive? Is it technology is in your way? Is it, I don't know. Like, there's got to be like, what is the biggest thing they face?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different issues, and they all kind of coalesce. And the dating world is where you see all these things play out. But I think that people have today, we don't know ourselves well enough, right? So I think that's the biggest issue. We don't know exactly what we want, what we need, what works for us, what doesn't work for us. We're constantly bombarded by life and by our online presence, the digital world, and just the fast-paced nature of society. We have too many things coming at us, so we don't really take that time to sit back and think about these things. So, when you're talking about if you are dating and you're looking to find a partner, you have to know what works for you. You have to know yourself. You have to know what your stuff is. You have to know what your baggage is. And you have to kind of, at least do some sort of self-analysis to understand where you might be coming up short, so to speak. We could always do things better, right? And that plays out in our relationships. I mean, our shortcomings are revealed most times through interaction and in our close personal relationships. So I think that's key. We just kind of like haphazardly, randomly, like throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping we hit the bullseye.
Right.
So I think that's our biggest problem today.
You know what? And I'm going to agree with you 100%. I think so many people, whether they're divorced or never married, okay, sometimes they haven't identified what they even need to fulfill your heart. And my dad told me this one time. He said, focus on the things that you don't want. And if they have those things, you're going to save yourself a lot of time.
Sure. Yeah, that's a clue. That's a big clue. I mean, we always, as people, we know more about what we don't like and what we don't want than what we do. That's a little bit harder to kind of figure out. So yeah, of course, if you find things that, you see things that you don't want, then that's pretty easy. The challenge comes in where you don't see any of those, but you're not connecting. You're not able to figure out how to, how you feel and right. how you feel about another person, how you feel about, person A versus person B. I mean, we have this situation today where we have many more options available to us due to the nature of dating, and we can kind of get confused as well. So we're kind of, random, in how we process these things as opposed to taking a closer look at them.
Sure. It's an interesting topic. It really is. And I know I joke and I'm kidding with you, but then there is the whole serious side of it. Mm-hmm. You hear so many stories about people meeting somebody online or forget online. You could meet them in a restaurant, or maybe you met somebody at a concert or something. Right. But sometimes it takes like a long time. Like you fall in love and you're like, oh, this person's awesome. And then you find out they're actually married. Like I hear these stories like, oh my gosh, he had a whole second life, or she had a whole nother life. She never ended her relationship with her fiance, right? And sometimes you don't discover that right away. It happens more times than not.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think that if you're asking the right questions and you're spending time with someone on a consistent basis, then you kind of have those answers. I mean, to me, it would seem kind of odd if, I was dating someone for, say, a year or 2 years and then find out they were secretly married. I mean, in those
that's a long time.
Yeah, exactly. In those situations, it's usually like a long distance relationship, right. Something where you're kind of missing that consistent contact, right?
Yeah.
So I think it does happen, but it doesn't happen maybe as often as we think. Now, granted, that's different than going out on, having a second or third date with someone and then finding out that, they're not technically available. Right. Much different.
You have to like read between the lines. If they tell you they're working on an oil rig and they only come into the mainland every 3 weeks, right. Do some homework. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And then you have to figure out, the key is really figuring out what's right for you. Are you okay with a situation like that? For example, long distance relationships are very difficult, and for those reasons in particular. So if you're the type of person that wants to maintain some sort of connection, you want some sort of consistency, then maybe that's not the right relationship for you. So that's kind of part of what I talk about in the book is, knowing yourself, knowing what works for you and the type of relationship you're looking for.
Sure.
It works for some people. It doesn't work for others.
So Vince, let's compare something of old school, traditional, right? I mean, our parents were facing different things when they were dating than we faced. And, 22-year-olds are facing something different than 50-year-olds. And what's coming to mind is the topic of money. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm going out on a date and I take her to dinner. Okay. Does the younger generation today feel the obligation to pick up the tab? Or, in the old days, they showed up, they had roses, right? It was today. It's like, I'm not spending any money on roses. Where are we today? What is right? What is wrong when it comes to the financial side of things when you're on a date? And then when do you talk about money? Do you have money in the bank? Do you have stocks? I mean...
All right. Well, that conversation, about money, that's further down the road, of course. But, and I can't necessarily speak to what the younger generation is doing right now, but there is a standard protocol for the most part when you're talking about an actual date. Then, yeah, it's standard protocol that the man pays for the first date, right? And then after you've gotten through the first and you decide you're going on a second or a third, you kind of have to have that conversation. So you at least need to discuss that and get the other person's thoughts about what they feel is appropriate. So again, it's all about communication. But yeah, as for how dating works or how it should work, yeah, there's still, even in today's society where you've got women who have they've got careers, they have their own money, etc. It's still the protocol for the man to pay for the first date.
Do you agree with that?
I do, because part of it, I mean, it's essentially part of like the guy's responsibility when it comes to courting in a way. So there's and these are what we're talking about here kind of blends into our psyche. So it's like we're wired a certain way as men and as women. So part of the role, or part of the masculine role, is that the guy is the one to do the pursuing, so to speak. So like, how many women have you talked to who said, oh, I can't ask a man out on a first date, right? It's just like, it's not part of their DNA.
It's never happened to me in my life.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Very, very.
Nobody's ever asked me out on a date ever.
Right. Well, that makes perfect sense, because that's encoded in our evolution as a species, as humans.
Right.
And there's a great book that talks about all this. It's called The Evolution of Desire by David Buss, where he goes into how we're wired, if going all the way back to, say, prehistoric times, right? So if we kind of like condense this down and boil this down to just that first date, it's like, yes, okay, it's the guy's responsibility to ask a woman out on a date and then pay for the first date. Right.
I have to tell you, I went out on a date one time, first time date, and it was actually last year when I paid a visit to Raleigh before I moved here, and I met somebody. It was just a coincidence. I met somebody, and we went out on a date. She insisted on paying for her own meal. It was actually, I have to be honest, I was annoyed. It's like, she's got her money and she's, counting out her $9. We went out to lunch and she's counting it right to the penny. And I kept saying, no, I've got lunch. Don't worry about this. I've got lunch. And she would not let me. It was almost like against her religion to let me buy her lunch. But then when we were, when the date was over, she goes, we're going to do good together. Like, she already finalized this. And all I could think about is, look, first of all, your perfume is gagging me. She had some perfume. I could smell the perfume before she even sat down at the table, but that's a whole nother story. But, yeah, I don't think women should pay for or your partner. I shouldn't say men or women, but if you initiated the date, pick up the tab.
Yeah, exactly. I know that there's some resistance to that, but then there's also what kind of dovetails into that is due to the nature of today's like hangout culture. This is a bigger problem.
Right.
It's okay, let's get together and let's hang out. So, we have this problem where people are asking others, let's just hang out, whether it's in a group or it's a one-on-one setting. And it causes a whole lot of confusion, right? Because usually the other person doesn't know if they agree to it. They don't know if this is a date. And if so, what's the proper protocol for this?
Right.
The line is, when it comes to dating, yeah, there's still a protocol, whether you like it or not, that's just the way it goes, because that's wired into our behaviors as who we are. So yeah, it causes a lot of confusion for sure. Definitely those types of situations where women insist on paying for that first date or paying their half, that can cause some confusion as well, because then you're thinking, oh my God, does she not want a second date? I mean, if she's paying her own way, she's probably like ready to get out, rock out, call her friends and say, hey, this was horrible, so we have all these things as guys running through our heads as well,
right? And
that just causes more confusion.
Well, first of all, I think the term hangout, if anybody asks you if you want to hang out on the first date, that kind of concerns me, because right away they're just testing the waters. They have three others lined up, and that hangout term to me is an easy out. They're setting up an easy out, don't you think?
Oh, sure. And I think for us, for our generation, yeah, it probably is more concerning, but it's also kind of permeated the culture. So it's not as foreign as it used to be in a way. But yeah, when you someone uses the term hangout, there's really no, definitive, we know what this is. And I think that men use the hangout term primarily because it is kind of a way out. It's like, okay, we could hang out, and if this person's not into me or I'm not into them, then, there's no psychological blow that you would normally receive. If you say, yes, I would like to take you out on a date, and the person says no, then there's a psychological blow, right?
Right,
so
right.
Like it hits our ego, and then we're like, oh, because, it's as I said, it's our job to ask for the date. And how many times have we been turned down over the years, right? I mean, just as
you're not asking me that question, are you?
I'm not asking you.
I could answer it with ease.
Exactly. All of us, and yeah, it kind of stings a little bit when you ask and you're interested in someone and they tell you no, and then you have to get up the nerve to do it again. And so I think that, women don't necessarily understand how difficult it is to continue getting repeatedly rejected. So it's like, from our side, we're looking at it as, oh man, we're building it up, and if it doesn't work out in our favor, we're like, oh my gosh, this hits me right here, and now I have to try to do this again. So dating stuff for both sexes.
I think when people are done watching the show, they're never going to go out on a date again after listening to you and I. But
I think since everybody's been home for the last couple months, they're going to be able to get out there. They're going to forget all about this conversation. So.
Oh my gosh. I just want to do a quick recap. I am talking with my guest, Vince Guaglione, who is the author of the book, Why Are You Still Single? An average Joe's take on what's really going on in the dating pool and what you can do to stay afloat. You're listening to Wake Up to the Vibe. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Vince, the one thing that I keep thinking of over and over, and I do sales training. It's my history of being in sales on a professional level. And I use this scenario when I'm training a sales rep on be the person to ask questions and not talk about yourself. Don't worry about talking about your company. Don't worry about talking about yourself and your product and the facts and the benefits. Leave that for a later time. If you were to walk into a restaurant by yourself and you sat down next to someone you're attracted to and start talking about yourself, not a good idea.
Mm-mm. No, I agree. Questions are important. That's really the key, because when you're meeting someone for the first time, there's a lot you don't know, right? So you want to be able to ask questions and engage and be engaged. Listen to the answers, comprehend what they're saying, ask follow-up questions. Distractions are big, right, today. So it's a very distracting environment that we're dealing with. We have our phones, right? And they're constantly going off, notifications, and it's best to just remove as many of the distractions as possible. Well,
that you just walked right into a whole nother topic of what's going on in the world today. The phones, right? Yeah. I mean, is there anything worse than going out on a date? Yet, have you ever had this happen to you? You go out on a date and she's more concerned in her text messages than you?
A few times that's happened. Yes, I think it's happened to everybody. Yeah, but that's the thing. We're so connected to these devices today, and it's almost been like a Pavlovian experiment, where you're sitting there and the phone's there and you're like waiting. It's like, oh, it went off, and then you have to go and answer the message. But we're not good at dealing with distractions. The best thing to do is take your phone, turn it on silent, put it away, turn it flat face down on the table, where it's not going to intrude into that space.
So if you're out on a date and your date is behaving that way, because that's a behavioral issue.
Sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. Is it wrong to say, hey, look, I really dig you. You're really nice. All right. But I'd rather hear about the country you're from. Can you put that phone down? Oh, you don't speak English?
Yeah. See, I think if you've gotten to that point, like immediately, that's a very difficult situation, because you want to be tactful about it. But then you've also got kind of an impression, even before you say anything, that this person is really more interested in what's going on there than he or she is about what we're doing here.
Right.
So it kind of like, it changes your opinion. It kind of sours you on that person anyway. So it's like, at that point, it's probably too late.
Done. Done. You're out of it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we should just we should have a show and just talk about nightmare dates all morning, because there's so many funny stories. I don't want to get personal, but I'll ask you a question, and if you want to take the fifth or pass, you can.
Okay.
Have you ever gone on any nightmare internet dates?
Let's see. Well, internet dates, it's funny because the previous book that I'd written, the bottom line is online never really worked well for me. So I've only had few. I would say I'd been on and off online dating since its inception, which is around 1999. So we're talking, 20 years where I'd maintained online dating profiles. And I had very, very few internet dates over the course of those 20 years. But, I have had a few where, I've had that first meeting and, they just haven't worked out well. And one in particular, this was probably, I would say about maybe, we're going all the way back to maybe 2008, 2007. One person that I had met online.
It was dial up. You were listening to the modem dial up before her picture loaded.
Yeah, well, this was back in the day of pagers, right? So she shows
pagers.
Up. Yeah, and she had like a utility belt of pagers. She was like Batman, I was like, oh. But she had about 4 or 5 pagers, and then one of the old
4 or 5. Right? She's busy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And
was this legal, Vince? Was this a legal date?
Yeah.
Craigslist.
Perfectly legal. No. It was actually OkCupid, if you could believe that, way back when.
Okay.
So it was a date from OkCupid, and she also showed up wearing a camera around her neck. So she had a camera on a strap around her neck, and I was like,
what?
What's your camera? That's a pretty cool camera. She's like, yeah, I take it with me wherever I go. It's like, okay. So we're sitting outside outside a cafe, and we're talking, and then she was distracted here and there, but one portion of the date, there was like a butterfly that was flying around a bush behind where we were sitting. So I was in the middle of conversation, and she gets up and she just starts taking pictures of the butterfly. So I stopped in mid-conversation. I thought, well, this is pretty odd. And then, of course, about 10 minutes later, one of the pagers went off. She goes like, oh, I have to go. This is work. And she was out. But yeah, it was so interesting.
I have to ask you, did you see the butterfly?
No, it was behind me.
Okay, so you sure she was taking a picture of a butterfly? She was taking a picture of you.
Oh no, she got up and went right over to it. So I wasn't even in the frame. Yeah, the butterfly was definitely more interesting than I was that day.
That's funny. One time I
used to say there was no second date.
There was no second date. No. I have a situation, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I went out on an internet date. I was newly single, if that's a term. I went out on this internet date, and I said, you know what, let's go to this bar for a cocktail. And it was Pinhead Susan's. I'm never going to forget this, because when I walked in, my buddy's band is playing. I'm like, oh, this is not good. So they're calling my name on the microphone. I go, oh, this is embarrassing. She's like, oh, you know these guys? And I'm like, yeah, he's a friend of mine. Well, they call me up to play the guitar with the band. Well, when I play guitar, I sweat like a beast. So I'm like, no, I don't want to play. Come on up, play a song. No, I don't want to. Come on, play a song. Well, after a couple cocktails, I'm like, hey, yeah, come on, let's jam out, right? I break into this mad sweat. I sit back down at the table. She got up and left. She was like, no, guitar player who sweats. I want nothing to do with this guy. I was kind of happy, to be honest with you, because my buddies were all there, and I was like, I got to hang out with them. But do you think like anxiety and sweating, like sometimes people don't give you a fair chance? Like if you go out on a date and you're nervous, that's kind of natural, right?
Sure.
So don't ditch the partner. I mean, there's potential here. They could be an amazing person once they stop sweating.
Yeah, I think, that's one of those things where if you know you're nervous, right? I think that if you tell the other person, well, I'm kind of nervous, or I mean, they're usually okay with that. I don't really
Yeah,
see that as a
good.
problem. Yeah, because that's been said to me at times as well, and I was like, oh, well, just be yourself. It's okay. It's cool. I understand. No problem. So yeah, that's one of those things that we're talking about. If we're talking about like communication, that's an easy one, right off the jump. Just how are you feeling? I'm nervous, whatever. You should be able to share that, and that shouldn't be any sort of issue.
I like that, and I never thought about that. Just be honest about it, and rather than you're sitting there and you're tearing up every little piece of paper on the table, you're biting your fingernails, you're sweating. Yeah, just let them know, hey, man, this is nerve-wracking. I haven't been single in 20 years, and she finally left me, and now,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not dating. It's not easy. It's a full contact sport.
It's a full contact sport.
Yeah,
it's a rough sport, man. I mean, it really is. Some of the topics that are coming to mind, I really don't know how far I can go on Wake Up to the Vibe. But let's say you're dating, okay, and you've gone out a few times, okay. And we're not talking teenagers, okay? So, I don't know about you, but I don't make out on the first date, Vince. So now all of a sudden you've gone out.
A place, right?
What do you do when you go out? You've gone out on 3 dates, and now is the moment, right? You're sitting closer together. You put your arm around her. You got Barry White playing. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, it's that kiss, and it's horrible. It's wet. What do you do? How do you backtrack? What do you do? Do you talk about it? You like her. She's a good person. Her breath was horrible, and she kisses terrible.
Yeah, that's a question I've never fielded before, actually. So,
Vince, we're getting down to the core here, man. You're on Wake Up to the Vibe. We got to solve some problems.
Yeah, that's definitely an awkward situation, to say the least. And I guess at that point, again, you want to be honest about things, right? But you also don't want to be mean about it either, right?
Right.
You don't want to be accusatory or anything like that. So I'm sure there's ways you can kind of sugarcoat that to say, this is cool, but here's what I'm feeling about this or whatever. I don't know.
Vince is going right now. You're saying to yourself, why did I agree to this interview?
Why did you ask me that question? Oh, man.
But no, I have the solution though. All right. So you've gone out on a few dates, and all of a sudden that magic moment, right? And you kiss. That's when you pull out the breath mints and say, hey, would you like one? That's
actually a good strategy.
You have one yourself, and then you out for her one, and then you go, no, take two. Take two, they're free. Oh my gosh. Anyway, hey, listen, I think it was Tony Robbins. And I don't, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm sorry, Tony. But I listened to a lot of his stuff. And one time he said, if you want to attract someone, ask yourself if you are the person you're trying to attract. In other words, if you're someone who sits on the couch and all you do is eat and watch TV and you're overweight, there's a slim chance you're going to attract the physically fit person who's out jogging 4 miles a day and is toned. And so you got to be real and be the person that you want to attract. And I just thought that was a brilliant perspective on how to attract the others. So I started jogging. I'm just kidding. I can't run for my life. I'm top heavy. When I jog, I fall forward. It's not a pretty scene. But what are your thoughts on that? On does that make sense?
Yes, to an extent. I think what we're talking about here, I mean, you could separate this and extrapolate in a number of different ways, but we're talking about, like, from this perspective, a lifestyle, right? So let's talk lifestyle first. So you have to have similar lifestyles in order for your relationship to maintain some sort of consistency, right?
Right.
So if you have two different lifestyles, you both have to be okay with that and willing to accept that, or that's just going to cause friction. Like, for example, I mean, I'm an active person, but I sit on the couch a lot myself. I do a lot of reading. And for me, I know that, I am not going to be able to date someone who is a world traveler. I'm not a world traveler. I'll go to a few places here and there, but, I really have no desire to, go to the far ends of the globe and to backpack across Asia or whatever. So if I am dealing with someone or I'm meeting someone who is a world traveler, I know that that's a lifestyle clash.
Oh, that's
right?
a good point. Yeah.
And that certainly would cause issues unless you're okay with that person just taking off and going and doing their thing, and they're okay with you just sitting on the couch, right? So that's, lifestyle is a big one. But then, of course, the person, when we're talking about the person that you want to be, it's okay if you want to be that person where you're sitting on the couch. But, what we're really talking about are values here, right? So it's like the person that you connect with that shares your values. That's the person, or that's the type of person that would give you the best chance at long-term success.
Values.
So your values have to map up. Yes.
Yeah. Core values.
Core values. Right?
Core values. Great point. Lifestyle, because I think sometimes people are kidding themselves. I think people in general, loneliness is a horrible thing. Nobody likes to be alone. Let's admit it. Somebody wants to hold. Everybody wants. I actually wrote a song about it, and it says everybody has a hand they want to hold. When you're alone, sometimes you will take desperate measures. Right. And you'll go out with that person who has the extreme lifestyle, like the girl, because I played in the band. I get it. She didn't want to be with a guitar player in a band. He's going to get home at 2:00 in the morning. He stinks. I understand. I mean, I can say this because I was that guy. But sometimes people will go just to go because they have no social life and somebody finally asked them out. Is that a good idea?
No, loneliness is, that's a primary driver for a lot of people. And the bottom line is, you have to be okay with doing life yourself, being self-sufficient, right? Because at the end of the day, this having a partner will enhance our lives, right? But we can't just be locked into that, because anything can potentially happen. I dated someone many years ago who had passed away. So, for me, it was like, okay, I was, in a stable relationship, and now I'm kind of like thrown back out there. But if I wasn't able to do life on my own, I probably would have sunk, and gone down into that, just nasty place where you can't crawl your way out of. Bottom line is, we all have to be okay with doing life on our own. And once you get to that point, then you can kind of focus, and it gives you a different perspective. So you get to look at things from a different view, and you gain clarity.
Yeah, you totally nailed it. You nailed it. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to do life on your own. Right. Find your own happiness. Be happy with you and your core and your faith and your values. Get all that in line first. And then when you're at that happy point, I think it's a lot easier for other people to be with you.
Right. You are at that. And at that point, yes, you are happier. You're more magnetic. You kind of, it radiates, it shows in your personality. So naturally, people are going to be drawn to that. A lot of this stuff is energy too. So, we could sense when, we're sitting across from someone who is in a good place,
right.
Is a happy person, is enjoying life, versus someone who, might be just more closed off, just unsure, or just has that like a look of desperation.
Right.
And I know, because I was there myself. I mean, that was basically my 20s. From my late teens into my into my late 20s, my dating life was a complete disaster. But I was someone who was in a bad place. So naturally, of course, people are going to sense that, and they're going to feel that, like, okay, I'm staying away from this guy.
Right, right. Some good stuff here. The book is called Why Are You Still Single? And the author is Vince Guaglione. It was a pleasure having you this morning, man. It's good stuff. We could go on forever on this topic. I think you and I need to get together and have a cold one and share some stories.
Yeah, maybe sounds good.
Maybe we'll record it and we'll play it again. Who
knows? Post quarantine, we'll get back on this stuff, right?
How can somebody buy your book? I was reading through it, and I was fascinated because you touch on the whole psychological aspect. I mean, there was a lot of topics we didn't hit on because we let the conversation go of two guys that are not married talking about this topic. But how does somebody buy your book? Is it on Amazon? Can I get it? Is it on my Kindle?
Yeah, they're all the books are up on the Amazon site, and you can get these two books either as ebooks or paperbacks. And they're also across a number of other of the major ebook and paperback platforms as well. So you can go to Barnes and Noble, Kobo, iBooks. I have links on my website that point to, they're basically universal links, so they will send you to where the book is available. All you do is just click the button of the platform you want, and it'll pop up on that platform, and then you can just buy it from there. Beautiful.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, it's www.vinceguaglione.com. That's VinceGuaglione.com.
VinceGuaglione.com. Why Are You Still Single? What about your other book? We didn't talk about it, and maybe that's for another show, but is that for sale as well?
Yes, it is. Yes, and that's the previous book, written 2 years ago. Yes.
So that's Confessions of a Middle-Aged Short Guy with No Game.
Yep.
Listen, but Vince, when you go out on a date and somebody asks you what you do and you say, I'm an author, and they go, okay, so really? Wow, what books did you write? Do you find do they have a problem or hesitation as soon as you talk about, well, I got a book on dating and a short guy with no game?
Right. Well, actually, this is, I have a real job, so that's usually how I would respond.
You start off with that.
Right. Yeah, the author stuff always comes up, and then it's, it's kind of, because I've done, a bunch of personal growth, personal transformation work, and then now we've got, I've done the books on my experiences and what I see going on in the dating world. Yeah, it does kind of, it makes for interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Fun stuff. Hey, thank you so much for being on Wake Up to the Vibe, taking time this morning and talking about this topic. It's a fascinating topic to me, and it's dear to my heart. It really is. Maybe because I could relate to it so much.
I think we all can. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great. Don't run away. I'm gonna drop you back into the waiting room, and I'm gonna close out the show. But you and I are gonna chat for a couple minutes, so just kind of stand by. Okay.
Sounds good, Joe.
Vince Guaglione, ladies and gentlemen, author of Why Are You Still Single? And you're waking up to the vibe here. Hold on one second. We're gonna do this and this. So listen, thank you so much for joining us here on Wake Up to the Vibe. Make sure you like, share, post. Tomorrow, The Young Fables. That is happening tomorrow. You want to tune in. And then on Thursday, Carter and Cassandra Scambato. And then on Friday, Rebecca Piccone will be helping me out with Quarantine with the Vibe Tribe. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I know I enjoyed being with you. I'm Joe Altieri saying have a blessed day.